In the quiet suburb of Cedar Park, Texas, 27-year-old Jessika Kalaher seemed to have it all. She was an aspiring elementary school teacher, passionate about shaping young minds. Known for her warmth and dedication, Jessika had always been the type to go the extra mile for others, and her family was her greatest support system. She had dreams of making a real difference in the classroom, a dream that had taken root long before she ever set foot in college. Jessika had recently completed her degree, and her future looked incredibly bright. But on the evening of September 17, 2009, Jessika's routine was about to take an unthinkable turn. It was late, just after 1 a.m. Jessika, like many others, was out running an errand. She drove to a local Walmart to pick up some dog food, a simple task that would, tragically, be the last errand she ever ran. As she parked her car, she had no idea that someone was watching her. In the quiet suburb of Cedar Park, Texas, 27-year-old Jessika Kalaher was more than just a teacher in the making. She was a beloved daughter, a caring friend, and a woman with a promising future ahead of her. Growing up in a tight-knit family, Jessika had always shown a passion for education, inspired by the teachers who made a difference in her own life. She worked tirelessly toward her goal of becoming an elementary school teacher, and by all accounts, she was on the verge of achieving that dream. On the night of September 17, 2009, Jessika left her home around 1:30 a.m. She had an errand to run, buying some dog food at the local Walmart. It was a mundane task, something most of us have done countless times. Little did she know, this would be her last errand. As Jessika stepped out of her car and walked into the store, she had no reason to feel anything but safe. But someone was watching her. Surveillance footage later revealed a man, later identified as Crispin Harmel, following her from the parking lot. Harmel had been lurking around, and as Jessika returned to her car, he made his move. What happened next would set in motion one of the most chilling murder investigations Cedar Park had ever seen. Harmel, a stranger to Jessika, walked up to her car, opened the door, and entered on the driver's side. Minutes passed. Jessika was never seen again. The footage, though grainy, revealed the final, eerie moments of her life. Harmel drove off in her car, and no one knew where she had gone. The city would soon be gripped by the mystery of Jessika's disappearance, and what authorities uncovered would leave them, and the community, shocked. At 1:44 a.m., Jessika Kalaher stepped out of Walmart with bags of dog food in hand. What should have been a quick errand turned into a haunting encounter. Surveillance footage captured a man, later identified as Crispin Harmel, following Jessika across the parking lot. Unbeknownst to her, Harmel was about to change her life forever. Moments later, Harmel approached Jessika's car and got inside. The two exchanged words briefly, but the footage was cut off just after. Jessika's car then left the parking lot, driving into the night. For the next hour, Jessika's whereabouts remained a mystery. Her car returned at 2:40 a.m., but Jessika was no longer visible. Harmel, seen exiting her car, walked toward a nearby red truck, casually leaving the scene. Jessika remained in the car, unresponsive and motionless, her life quietly slipping away. Hours passed, and Jessika never returned home. Her family, growing worried, began reaching out, but they couldn't find any trace of her. The following morning, Jessika's cousin, concerned for her safety, decided to search the area around the Walmart. That's when she stumbled upon Jessika's car, parked in the lot of a nearby pizza restaurant. At first, it didn't seem unusual. Jessika's white Kia was locked, and everything appeared normal. But as the cousin approached the vehicle, a sinking feeling took over. Inside the car, Jessika was slumped over, lifeless. Her eyes were closed, and there was no sign of movement. It was clear that something was terribly wrong. Authorities arrived shortly after the discovery. The police quickly assessed the scene, and the harsh reality of the situation began to settle in. Jessika had been strangled. Her body showed no signs of a struggle, but the coroner's report would later reveal that she had died from blunt force trauma and suffocation. There were no obvious clues at first, no signs of forced entry or theft. The only thing that seemed out of place was the unsettling stillness of her body. And the fact that she was parked in such an unusual location, far from her original destination, raised more questions than answers. As investigators began to piece the details together, they realized the crime was far more calculated than they could have imagined. When Jessika Kalaher was found lifeless in her car hours after her routine errand, investigators had little to go on. There were no obvious signs of struggle or forced entry, and no clear motive. But one thing was certain: something was terribly wrong. Detectives began piecing together the scant details of the night. Surveillance footage from the Walmart parking lot became their most valuable clue. The video showed Jessika walking to her car, but what stood out was the figure who followed her. Crispin Harmel, a man with no prior connection to Jessika, was seen entering her vehicle. The footage was grainy, but it was enough to raise alarms. As detectives dug deeper, they found that Harmel had no record of contact with Jessika. No social media connections, no phone records, no history between the two. Everything about their encounter seemed completely random, yet chillingly calculated. Harmel had no prior criminal history, and at first, he seemed to slip under the radar. When Harmel was brought in for questioning, his story was shaky at best. He claimed he had been with Jessika, but the details didn't add up. He told investigators that he had met her at a bar earlier in the night, but there was no evidence to support this claim. Further interrogation revealed inconsistencies in his statements, raising even more suspicion. Despite the lack of direct physical evidence, the detectives knew they were on the right track. Harmel's behavior was increasingly erratic, and his conflicting statements only deepened the mystery. The absence of fingerprints or DNA evidence was frustrating, but the surveillance footage had already set the stage for the next critical step: his arrest. By the time Harmel was officially charged with capital murder, the case had become a national headline. The public was gripped by the chilling randomness of the crime, and the police were determined to uncover the full story behind the murder of Jessika Kalaher. The breakthrough in the investigation came when surveillance footage from the Walmart parking lot was reviewed. It showed Jessika walking to her car, seemingly unaware of the man trailing her. But it wasn't until the footage revealed him entering her vehicle and driving away that investigators knew they had a crucial lead. The man in the footage was Crispin Harmel, a 30-year-old Cedar Park resident with no prior connection to Jessika. The images were chilling: Harmel's appearance, the way he casually approached Jessika's car, and the lack of any apparent struggle. The mystery was growing, but so were the questions. What had motivated him to target Jessika? Was it a random encounter, or was there something more? Harmel's actions made no sense, and it soon became clear that he had lied about his involvement in the crime. When questioned by police, Harmel initially denied any wrongdoing. He claimed that he had simply been walking through the parking lot when he noticed Jessika's car, but his story didn't hold up. No one had seen him in the area before that moment, and his explanation of how he ended up in her car was riddled with contradictions. Then, as investigators dug deeper, they uncovered even more damning evidence. Harmel's cell phone records revealed he had been near the scene during the time of the murder. But even more compelling was the forensic evidence from the car. DNA traces were found linking him directly to the crime. It became clear that this was no random encounter. Harmel had deliberately targeted Jessika. With the mounting evidence, authorities arrested Crispin Harmel, charging him with the brutal murder of Jessika Kalaher. What seemed like an ordinary trip to the store had turned into something far darker. But Harmel wasn't backing down. His defense would soon make this case even more complex. After Crispin Harmel's arrest, the wheels of justice slowly began to turn. The community was shocked, and Jessika's family felt a mixture of grief and a burning desire for answers. The trial of Harmel began in 2014, and it was expected to provide the closure they desperately needed. But what should have been a clear-cut case turned into something far more complicated. Harmel's defense attorneys fought tooth and nail to cast doubt on the evidence. They argued that the prosecution's case was weak, built on shaky footage and circumstantial evidence. The defense introduced their own theories, including claims that Jessika's death was a tragic accident. Despite the mounting evidence, surveillance footage, Harmel's contradictory statements, and forensic analysis, the case was not as straightforward as it seemed. During the trial, a critical mistake was made by the prosecution. An improper statement was made regarding the legal charges, and it was enough for the judge to call for a mistrial. The room fell into stunned silence. Jessika's family, who had been holding their breath throughout the trial, were left devastated as the case was dismissed, and Harmel walked free, temporarily. For the family, it felt like a betrayal of the justice they believed was in their reach. Harmel's unexpected release from jail left the community questioning how such a clear case could fall apart. The mistrial not only extended the pain for Jessika's family but also sent shockwaves through the community. The fight for justice seemed farther away than ever before. Yet, despite the legal setback, Jessika's story was far from over. The road to justice for Jessika Kalaher was far from straightforward. After the initial trial ended in a shocking mistrial in 2014 due to prosecutorial errors, the community was left in limbo. Jessika's family, still reeling from their loss, had to endure the uncertainty of the case being thrown out. But for the victim's family and the community that had rallied around Jessika, the fight for justice was far from over. In 2018, 4 years after the first trial, the case was brought back to court. Crispin Harmel, who had been charged with capital murder for the brutal killing of Jessika, was once again facing the full weight of the legal system. The prosecution this time was relentless, presenting new evidence that had been painstakingly gathered since the mistrial. They used the original surveillance footage of Harmel following Jessika through the parking lot and later entering her car, a key piece of evidence that had first linked him to the crime. Experts testified to the chilling nature of his actions, outlining how Harmel had planned to abduct and ultimately kill Jessika. The case against him was now stronger than ever. Throughout the trial, Harmel's defense remained the same. He denied killing Jessika and suggested that her death was a result of a botched sexual encounter. But the prosecution was determined to show the jury the cold truth. Jessika had not known Harmel before that night. Their connection had been a tragic and random one that ended with a violent murder. There was no evidence to support Harmel's version of events. The trial's most damning evidence came from the text messages found on Harmel's phone and his earlier statements to the police, all of which painted a portrait of a man who was lying to cover his tracks. He was caught in a web of inconsistencies, and the jury could see through his defense. The tension was palpable as the jury deliberated. In the end, after a trial that had dragged on for months, the decision was clear. Harmel was found guilty of capital murder for the brutal death of Jessika Kalaher. The conviction marked a moment of justice, but for Jessika's family, it was only a small step toward healing. Harmel was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The verdict was a relief, but the family knew that no sentence would ever bring Jessika back. For them, the court's decision was a bittersweet ending to a horrific chapter in their lives. The long wait for justice had finally come to an end, but for those who loved Jessika, the pain of losing her remained. Her legacy, however, would not be forgotten. After a lengthy trial and a retrial in 2018, justice for Jessika Kalaher was finally delivered. Crispin Harmel, the man who had brutally taken her life, was found guilty of capital murder. The jury determined that Harmel had intentionally killed Jessika during the commission of kidnapping, robbery, and aggravated sexual assault. In the courtroom, the emotional weight of the verdict was felt not only by Jessika's family but by everyone who had followed the case closely. Harmel's actions had left a scar on the community that would never fully heal, but at least, for her loved ones, there was the comfort of knowing that the man responsible for her death would face the consequences. Harmel was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. There would be no chance for him to ever walk free again, no possibility of a second chance. For Jessika's family, the sentencing marked the end of an agonizing chapter. They had endured years of uncertainty, confusion, and pain. First with the devastating murder, then the frustrating mistrial, and finally, the long wait for justice. The sentence did not bring Jessika back, but it was the justice her family had been fighting for. In the years that followed, Jessika's story continued to resonate with the people who knew her and with those who followed her case. The community of Cedar Park, though forever changed by the loss, began to rally around a cause, ensuring that Jessika's memory would live on in the fight for justice for all victims. Jessika's tragic death had ignited awareness about personal safety and the importance of being vigilant, even in seemingly safe, familiar places. The case also sparked deeper conversations about how the justice system could improve its handling of such cases to ensure that justice for victims is timely and transparent. Jessika's family, although forever grieving, became vocal advocates for stronger protections and more efficient legal processes, ensuring her legacy was one of both love and lasting change. The case of Jessika Kalaher's murder left an indelible mark on Cedar Park, Texas, and on the hearts of all who followed the investigation. Her tragic death brought to light the harsh realities that can exist behind the most seemingly ordinary encounters. What began as a normal night, with a woman simply running an errand, ended in a brutal act of violence that shocked an entire community. As the case unfolded, it became clear that Jessika was a victim of pure chance, a random act of cruelty that left her family and friends shattered. In the aftermath of her murder, Jessika's story became more than just a cautionary tale, it became a call for change. The investigation, the arrest, and ultimately the conviction of Crispin Harmel showed the relentless pursuit of justice, even when the evidence seemed scant. This case demonstrated the power of technology, like surveillance footage, in modern criminal investigations, showing how a single piece of video evidence can be the key to unraveling a complex mystery. Jessika's family, through their grief, became advocates for victims' rights, speaking out on behalf of families who had lost loved ones in senseless acts of violence. Their strength in the face of such unimaginable loss has inspired many and reminded us all of the importance of supporting one another during difficult times. But Jessika's story also serves as a warning. It's a reminder that safety can never be taken for granted. No matter how ordinary an action may seem, the unexpected can always occur. Jessika's murder underscores the necessity of vigilance in everyday life and the importance of trusting our instincts. In a broader sense, the case of Jessika Kalaher is a stark reminder that justice is often slow but still possible. Even when a crime is shrouded in uncertainty, those responsible will eventually be held accountable. For Jessika's family, the conviction of Harmel brought them a sense of justice, but it could never bring her back. Her story, though painful, continues to echo in the hearts of those who remember her, and the lessons learned from her death remain as relevant as ever. Never stop seeking justice, never stop supporting those who have been wronged, and never take safety for granted. Now that you've heard the shocking twists in Jessika Kalaher's story, we want to know, what do you think? Was justice truly served when Crispin Harmel was sentenced to life in prison? Or do you believe there's more to this story that still needs to be uncovered? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We love hearing your theories and interpretations, and we'll be reading some of them in our next video. And while you're at it, don't forget to hit that like button if you believe in justice for victims like Jessika. If you want more cases like this one, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. We're bringing you the most compelling, heart-stopping true crime stories every week. Your voice matters. Share your opinion, and let's keep this conversation going. When the verdict was read, the courtroom fell silent. Crispin Harmel, the man responsible for the brutal murder of Jessika Kalaher, was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The long, painful journey for justice had reached its conclusion, but for Jessika's family, the pain would never fully fade. Her parents, her siblings, and those who knew her best were left to grieve a life that was stolen far too soon. Jessika's tragic death was not just a senseless act of violence, it was a loss that reverberated throughout the entire community of Cedar Park. Her story would never be forgotten, and the injustice she suffered sparked a renewed sense of urgency around safety, awareness, and the importance of being vigilant in everyday life. The case of Jessika Kalaher brought to light the depths of human depravity, but it also highlighted the relentless pursuit of justice. For Jessika's family and friends, this conviction, though bitter, was a step toward healing. But the memory of her bright spirit, her aspirations, and her kindness would live on forever in the hearts of those who loved her. As we reflect on this tragic case, one question remains: how can we ensure that no more lives are stolen in such a way? How can we protect those we hold dear from the unpredictability of evil lurking in the shadows? Justice, in this case, was served. But the work to protect and honor those who remain must continue. For Jessika Kalaher, her life, her dreams, and her story will not be forgotten. If you've learned something from Jessika's story, take a moment to reflect on the preciousness of life and the importance of always staying vigilant. And as always, if you want to continue following these stories of justice and human resilience, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and leave your thoughts in the comments below. We owe it to Jessika, and to all the victims who have yet to see justice, to keep their stories alive.